Yo, what is going on? We are back with another episode of the Unsilent Church Podcast. This is season 5, I believe, that we are in, and I'm super excited. It's been a while since I get to, see the crew that's here, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
we're kind of in our seats, or I don't know. I think this seat seems different. Maybe there was some switching of the seats that has been going on.
Maybe you're different.
Yeah. maybe
expand it a little here.
Well, I mean, maybe that, or maybe the Lord is conforming me to the image of Christ.
It is.
How about that? You know what I'm
That's
saying? But with that, we got a new,
very sophisticated Jesus juke there.
Hey man, you got a little dual maneuver. You know what I mean? A little semi shake. But
Jamel Gibbs just.
But with that though, I want to pass over to Pastor Ramon because we got something Speaking of things a little bit different, got a little bit different that we're doing here with the Unsilent Church Podcast.
Yeah, so in this season, we've been hitting a couple of different topics that, in keeping with the Unsilent Church, things that the church or even the culture don't often think about. Last time we talked about mass incarceration. We have some other topics coming up, and that's very, very typical for Unsilent Church. We have sort of a big topic that we'll sort of think through, and we bring in experts, guests who can speak to those things. And so we have some things still coming up in this season for us to talk about. But one of the things we've talked about is that in the midst of our seasons, there's a lot of other things that come up in the news that are worth talking about that maybe don't warrant a whole episode, but almost like quick hits of things that are in different magazines or even podcasts, videos, that type of thing. I thought it'd be cool just for us to sort of bounce around and go through. And so we have 3 different ones that hopefully we'll hit today. And again, it's a little bit different format, but I think will be fun for us to do and helpful for just even in each season that we do for us to be able to address some things that are happening right now in the culture, right? Mm-hmm. So this first one comes from an article in Relevant magazine called Letting Go of the Good Christian Image. And we could probably link to it in the show notes, but the gist of it is this idea that when someone is being nice or doing good things, that means probably they're a Christian, right? The sort of assumption is that people acting a certain way, speaking a certain way means they're likely Christian. I've seen this happen with like people watching athletes. So this athlete says, "Thank God," right, for something. Or, "Oh, that person's probably, my kids do this. That person's probably Christian." And the article makes the point that's not necessarily true. Just because someone acts nice or does nice things doesn't mean they're a Christian. Being a Christian is attached to faith in Christ, etc. But the question for us, though, if we're going to sort of use this article as a springboard, that would be good to toss around is really, what does it mean to be a Christian anymore, right? And because what I think happens is people don't just say, okay, this person is acting this way, that means they're a Christian. It's also people vote this way, that means they're a Christian. This is the Christian position. Anyone who's a Christian would be this way, vote this way, think this way, act this way. And it's sort of, and I think we're feeling that more and more, in, particularly in election cycles, but not actually, frankly, just all the time now, right?
Yeah.
So what are your guys' sort of thoughts on that in terms of just this idea of like, here's what it means to be a Christian, and sort of attaching all these things that are essentially behavior oriented and increasingly related to certain voting patterns or political positions?
Yeah, I think there's the thought was initially, is the good Christian, air quotes, is the good Christian image dead? Mm-hmm. Because I think there was probably a time in the past where you could tell, because things might have been more stark in regards to the behavior of those who were Christian and those who weren't. Like, they were just, maybe the behaviors were they were more different. There was more contrast between those behaviors. Whereas now, it's just not as easy to tell, and people can do nice things but have
You'll be fronting.
Yeah, either be friendly or just have like a very heinous. So let's talk Diddy for a second.
Oh.
So if we're talking about like,
man, where's the bombs at? Hey man,
do we have to?
Hey, woo.
But if you think about it, depending on when you saw him, right, in an election season, you would have been like, "Yo, vote or die, man. Our people matter, man. We're trying to do some stuff to raise our people up. We want to make sure that." Like, we need to have representation in the media. So I'm going to start revolt. Man, we need to be out here doing the right things. Business. He's doing all this stuff.
Was he a billionaire too?
I think he did hit the billion mark. I think he hit the billion mark. So depending on when you saw him or in what way you saw him, if you judge the behaviors that you saw, if you judge the sort of external thing that you saw, it would have been like, oh man, he looks really kind. Look at what he's saying in this situation, depending on what he allowed you to see, and you'd be like, oh man, I wonder.
Yeah.
When in reality, you're like, oh no, there's a lot of heinous things happening behind the doors, and so it's just. And I don't know
see
if
the
it's
tension though. Does it invalidate the good things that he did?
I don't think it invalidates the good things that he did, but I think trying to make an assessment of who someone is only based on what you see. When the reality is that what you see is so limited. Like you can't make a judgment of who someone is based on the very limited view you have of them.
The Lord looks at the heart.
Exactly. Which you cannot see. Right. And so I think it just isn't safe. It's not a safe thing to make that kind of judgment.
Yeah. I think with the whole Christian term, even, I think that term is actually interesting because first time that's mentioned in the Bible, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's Acts chapter 11, somewhere around there. I think it's the first time that word is actually mentioned. And so
in some form,
no, actually literally says Christian, like the term itself. I think that's the first time that it's mentioned.
Okay.
And so my understanding of that, just from a simplest understanding is, someone who is a follower of Jesus, someone who's a follower of Jesus. But I feel like today, let me say this: in the Bible, there was always a distinction that was made for those people that were following the way,
Yep.
right? There was always the distinction. So
no Mandalorian,
like you said, there was a contrast, right? And so it doesn't. This whole thing is the good Christian image dead. Doesn't seem like there's much of a contrast today than maybe it was back then. And so that gets into the whole thing. But then this gets into the political thing too, because some people do attach, as what Pastor V was saying, they attach this idea of, well, you have to vote this particular way,
or you're not
that
Christian.
Makes you a Christian. We even had some prominent Christian pastors, megachurch pastors, that have said that, and that has crept into the ideology and has shaped some of the way that people even vote and what it means to be a Christian. So I feel like it just needs to be a reset button on like, what does the Bible actually say a Christian is, and what does that actually look like? But just because you say certain words doesn't make someone ultimately a Christian, and that's what gets into this article of like, external versus internal.
You mentioned megachurch pastors. Speaking of
a very poetic segue.
Here's our second topic. The problem with megachurches, or just in general, megachurch pastors, or maybe we can even say celebrity mega leaders, mega celebrity leaders.
There's something about the celebrity status.
The celebrity status,
because you're at the top of a megachurch, you've got tens of thousands looking at you, or you just
got
tens of thousands of followers on.
Or tens of thousands
of
socials,
social,
yeah, right. So mega followings, if we put it that way.
Right.
There's a bit of a broader topic. We are in another year, and I say another very deliberately. Every year, multiple scandals involving megachurch pastors or celebrity pastors, celebrity leaders with mega followings. Right. One of the big ones that hit all of us was Tony Evans stepping down from temporarily
Dagger
because of some type of infidelity that happened in the past.
Did they say it was infidelity?
Some type of inappropriate relationship with a woman, right?
I think the letter said something of an inappropriate. Yeah.
Oh,
I don't think it was deliberately said out in the public of what it actually was or whatever.
You said it wasn't criminal,
but it wasn't criminal, and it
whatever
was,
that means.
Yeah,
enough to cause him something with a woman while needing him to step down, right?
So just inappropriate.
Yeah. So, you guys familiar with Robert Morris, who's a big time sort of kind of prosperity Pentecostal pastor, leading one of the biggest, I think the biggest church in the country, Gateway. Also stepped down because of some interactions he had with a minor when he was like in his 20s or so, right? So that happened.
Did it come out, or did he like?
It
just came out, and so then he was like,
it came out. Yeah, it got. I think I forget how it came out. I think the woman older now sort of said, "Hey, this happened, and you guys did nothing about it." And and there was evidence of him confessing. Like he's confessed in a memoir of his that like, oh yeah, I had some bad interactions when I was in 20s, but he didn't mention it was with like someone who's like 14, right? So anyway, so there's two big huge examples. Steve Lawson recently, he's more in the fundamentalist world. big name in the Master Seminary, MacArthur circles, also confessed infidelity. And then Vince Bantu, of course, sadly, with a big following online, not necessarily in a big church, but huge following online, also came out with a lot of different sexual.
Well, he didn't come out with it.
Oh no, you're right. Other people came out with that. So, big question here when we get to the question, it really is sort of the mega church culture bad, right? Is it sort of create conditions? I mean, I've heard. I think Chuck DeGroat has argued that this sort of pastoring in general can attract narcissistic personalities, people with issues. The ability to sort of lead a church and grow it, right? Yeah, is not necessarily good for the soul, right? And as I said, I think I like the way you put it. Sort of whether you're leading that church, sort of a local church, or you're sort of leading something, a global movement of some kind that gives you a lot of attention, that allows you to speak and go all different places. Is that bad, right? Is that bad for Christianity in general?
Let me just hop in and say this before I even answer that question, because you just went through a whole bunch of
that's just this year.
Just this year of fallings of prominent pastors. And I just want to say like a couple of things. One, I just think that we also just got to keep those pastors' families in prayer, because when you mention Tony Evans, when you mention these type of people that have massive followings, like the families are also affected by that. Yeah. Their children is affected by that. You know what I'm saying? So I just want us to.
It's not just their families. It's a lot of families in those churches that are like.
That too. But I'm
and the woman they were with.
Yeah. That too. And so I guess what I'm just saying is I think there's a sensitivity. I think I just want us pastorally to kind of like also keep in mind. Not saying that we can't talk about it or not like that, but it's magnified, especially for those families and people that have obviously been influenced by them. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I just want to throw that out there. But to answer the question, you said is mega churches bad? Are mega churches bad?
Celebrity Christianity bad?
So here's the thing with that, man. In the Bible, influence in and of itself, I don't think is bad. Yeah. Paul had major influence. If Paul had a social media, if back then he would have all the followers. You know what I'm saying? He was a church planner. He was a missionary. He was a philosopher. Like he was one of them thinkers of the day. Wherever today where people are going to be a thought leader and thinker, Paul would have been one of them.
Now, Paul would have been tweeting like crazy.
You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So
he'd be posting threads. He'd be posting threads every day on people 3 times a day, just like.
And so influence of itself, I don't think is bad. With that said, though,
success in and of itself.
It's worldly success. But with that said, though, I do say depending on the person, depending on their background, depending on how they grew up, depending on their trauma, depending on all that type of stuff, that does do something to a man or a woman who is getting all that attention. It does something to us. And that could be a positive thing, but it can also be a negative thing. You take the person that grew up that did not like have influence,
who was neglected,
who was abused, who was all these types of things. But then they have a gift all of a sudden. Say it's rapping, say it's acting, say it's speaking, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, you went from nobody wanting you, no one, you know what I'm saying, to all of a sudden you got millions and literally millions of people buying your albums, watching your movies, buying your books, and then you get
shouting your name, wanting to touch you, wanting to be close.
Listen. It is I say this, it is a drug. Fame is a drug, and depending on how someone is able to manage it, etc., it could be very bad. So answer your question. No, I don't think it's bad, but I do think it is bad in the hands of the wrong person.
Well, and it feels to me, so it's not bad in and of itself, but I'm willing to say I think it might be bad for most people. Most people aren't prepared to handle it, and that's the problem. We have not yet done enough to help people understand how do you handle being successful, powerful, important, significant. What are you going to do if that happens to you? Yeah. Right. And it happens so often now. And especially I think the technology that we have today allows people to have success in a lot of different ways, right? Yeah. There's a lot of different ways in which you can get attention and status. I think there's something broken about how we are helping people be in the faith and know what it is to sort of be secure in the faith, such that they don't handle these things well.
Yeah, I do think I get the idea that there's something intoxicating about the attention. But it still begs me to ask, like, either why aren't or how do people set up the right fences, the right guards, the right boundaries, understanding this isn't the first year this has happened, right? Year after year after year. And again, this is not like Jesus was not unaware of these things. Like he knew the temptation of all this. Like his temptation, I will give you the kingdoms of the world if you bow. You know, there's always been this temptation when there's a lot of attention, when there's a lot of power, when there's a lot of influence, to give in to that at the cost of everything else. And so for anyone who's at that stage, again, you even ask, like, for many of these Christians now who have millions of following, they have crazy influence. Like, is it everybody? Like, is this just a thing that we like? Again, David was a man after God's own heart, and he became king, and he saw that thing and was like, I got to have it. Right. And he paid that price. And so is it a situation where it's just like, man, this is just, it's a thorn in the flesh? Is that just what it is? Or is there some way of setting up guards and fences and boundaries such that the attention just stops being put on the person? And I get to the degree it's like, let your good works shine so that they might see your good works and glorify God who is in heaven. Like Jesus, for sure, like drew thousands and thousands, you know, but he was successful at redirecting all that attention. And I'm just wondering, are we just not being as faithful to redirect that attention, or are we just gobbling it all up? And that's why we keep ODing on it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to, it goes back to what you're saying. You have to know yourself. Self-awareness. I think you have to have, it's important to have good people in your life, right, that keep you grounded, I think, and that you don't have, a lot of people clearly had secret lives that no one knew about, right?
Speak that, and also that out more. That part right there, that's very important. You said you got to have good people in your life that keep you grounded. Yep. Tease that. What does that groundedness look like?
And not all the times, but a lot of times it's interesting to me. You see people as they get bigger and have more status. They have, we talked about this with Kanye, they have less people speaking into their lives who just see them as normal people and can speak things that other people can't speak. Speak them into your life in a way that you'll hear, even if it's uncomfortable.
So not having yes men and yes women around you.
Exactly.
Yeah, pointing out the actual human moments. Like, nah, bro, I remember when you did that thing. Yeah. Like, nah, you just regular.
People who actually care about you, right? So, who not just hanger-oners, right? But who are able to
really know you.
I also think, too, for some people, you got to just recognize this isn't good for me. And you might have to intentionally cut back, right? Yeah. And that's hard. Like, it almost acts as like people, I'm so gifted, like, I just can't help it. Like, people need to hear my word, right? And I'm like, no, I think Christianity will survive well enough if, like, you have to hold back.
God will be just fine.
God will be just fine, right? And I think it's almost like success justifies more success. You have to, I think, check yourself and recognize maybe not the case for you, right? Yeah. So, let's hit this last topic. And this one gets right into, where we are right now. Kamala versus Trump. Kamala's giving Trump a much harder time than I think he anticipated. And but that being said, I mean, it is neck and neck, right? So it's very close in terms of just where that's heading out. I think what we're interested in is, it's been interesting to notice where evangelical pastors have fallen on this. I'm sorry, I think particularly white evangelical pastors, I think.
Yeah, the study wasn't clear. It just said by denomination. So it's just like...
So what's interesting
Baptist,
is...
non-denominational, like, it didn't matter.
So they've asked who you're voting for, and you said you have in your notes, our show notes, 50%. I thought it was like 60.
Could have been.
Said yes, they're voting for Trump. I want to add to this. What's interesting is it's not... This number has held true. It was around this or maybe even higher, even during the primaries. Mm-hmm. So what's really interesting to me is during the GOP primaries, we had all these other candidates besides Trump, right, who held, GOP type values and, even some similar sort of Trump things, right? So you had other options to pick besides Trump, and evangelical pastors still said, we want Trump, right? We want this guy, right? So it's been interesting to see that thorough line of... Even with the option to have someone, and I'll just say it, with people with better character, right, and less sort of overtly sort of all the things that Trump is, in terms of character and posture, that kind of thing, right? But still having the same political positions, people still pick Trump, continue to pick Trump. Yeah, I mean, what's the question here? I mean, I think, well, I'll just put it this way. What do you guys think about that? Is that something, is this one of the things like, well, it doesn't really matter what pastors think about these things, or is there a problem there that you see a statistic like that?
So I went and looked at so Lifeway Research did a survey, and that's where some of these numbers came from, as I found them. And they were like 11 characteristics, and it was interesting the order of importance. So based on what it was saying, it was like national security seemed to be the biggest one. So are we safe? And then religious freedom seemed to be another one. Foreign policy, economy was number 4. Immigration was 5. Then abortion. Then character was 7.
That was number 7.
That was number 7
out of 11.
Out of 11.
Interesting.
Then after that, it's Supreme Court. Then racial injustice, which is 9. Then after that, it gets to the role of government, number 10, and then climate change, number 11. That's what was a little bit more surprising to me. That character.
Yeah.
What explains why why Trump is acceptable the most.
But for pastors, that's my thing. For
what kind
pastors,
of pastors, though? These are
Baptist, non-denominational, like Protestant pastors, right? So it doesn't even. That was the thing for me. But in my mind, I was like, you would think character would be like, it'd be somewhere there. Are we safe? And is he a good guy? It's like, is the president
a good woman?
Yeah, good person.
Yeah.
Like, can they keep our country safe? That matters, right? Nobody wants wars and all that stuff going on. Foreign policy might have something to do with that, right? So the interrelationship, but like character to be 7.
What's wild here is, I mean, again, if you look at not all of them, but most of the other people who are running against Trump, all of them, you could have arguably had character and all the other things that they thought was important. Even I'd quibble with a lot of the ordering of that list. It's just interesting to me that clearly character has fallen in terms of just
it's just surprising to me
in our leaders, and that used to not be the case. Something has changed here, and it's crazy to me. I've heard different people sort of justify this change, right? Well, because of the left, look what the left is doing, which is just a really interesting argument because of what you consider the left to do. That justifies us doing whatever we want to do, right? Which is, we're not allowed to do that, right? You can't take a cheat code towards what we're responsible to be.
It's interesting to be like,
well, what's interesting is before, like I mean, Clinton, the big thing was like bad character. Like that's why he can't vote for him, right? All these other sort of ways in the past in which we said pastors have said character really matters, but no longer.
I mean, take a Bill Clinton situation. You know, what I mean, like
that's what I'm saying. Things have changed.
Like that's almost like if that was to happen today, it seemed like it wouldn't be a big deal.
It'd be like fair play. It'd be like,
that's what's interesting though. I think that's what's so.
Sorry, Bill. I didn't mean to come for you, Bill. I'm just saying, Bill.
We're not coming for you.
I ain't coming for you, but
But it's almost like it's more the worst thing is being a Democrat or being on the left as opposed to having bad character, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have bad character, but you're not a Democrat, you're a hardcore GOP person, we like you.
Well, it's almost as if I feel like we've fallen into a trap when in reality, the Christian issues can be argued from both sides, right? It's like the trap that's happened is that take specific.
They're saying that, but they would say no.
They would say no, but I'm just saying, like, if you consider how people are treated, that often is an issue that you hear from the air quote left, right? How are people treated? The immigrant, racial justice, that sort of thing. And then you have, well, we cannot advocate murder, right? When you think about abortion and the way we spend matters because that's because our economy helps us flourish and, that's what we want and those type of things. That's typically the conversation you hear from the air quote right. Yeah. I'm going, if you take the treatment of unborn children and the treatment of adult men and women, right? Those issues are on different sides. And you go, how can you say, like, how do you argue one over the other? You really can't. And I feel like that's the trap, right? And so so instead of us, I don't know what the answer is. Like, how do you trust God in a situation where we've been given 2 options to say that's all you get, right? Whereas in the days of like Roman occupation, I don't know if they're voting like that. You see what I'm saying? We've been given so much more power, privilege, authority, choice, and it seems like it's made things a little bit more difficult for us. You know?
Or do we only have 2 choices? I mean, technically we have more, don't we?
So they say.
I guess it depends on how you look at that, because historically there's never been. Typically, it's either Democrat or Republican.
Well, for a long time it's been. I mean, practically speaking, it is that, right?
Yeah. So, well, look, man, we then got 3 different topics, big topics at that we were able to. I don't know what we were able to do today.
We didn't solve the world's problems.
We didn't know, but we was able to kind of talk a little bit about it and trust.
How about this? You tell us.
You tell us.
You tell us. Like, what should we do? Are we missing anything? Are there more options than we've said that there are? You tell us in the comments. You let us know. What do you think?
And real quick, just what you need to tell us. 1, is the good Christian image dead? 1. 2, are churches bad for pastors? And by extension, bad for Christianity. And 3, let's just say this: who are you voting for? You voting for Madam Vice President?
Yeah, you don't got to answer that third question. But again, give us your thoughts. It's a new format, a number of things that we could talk about. But let us know what you think, and we'd love to hear from you.
As we always say, love God, love people. We are out. Peace.